What's going on everyone, and welcome back to another video. My name is Suman and today's analysis video is going to be about the Champions League game between Chelsea and Bayern Munich. So Chelsea lined up in a 3-4-3 formation which was mostly 5-4-1 on the ground without possession, and they also changed their formation to a back four in the second half. While Bayern Munich on the other hand lined up in a 4-2-3-1 formation which mostly shifted to a back three during the build-up phase. Kimmich would often drop in the defense with possession, and that would allow the fullbacks to move up and match Chelsea's defensive numbers with possession. The first half of this game was very competitive, and both the teams had a few really good chances to score some goals. Chelsea have been building their play from the back since the start of the last season, and they have been doing the same under Frank Lampard as well. But Chelsea made a slight change in their build-up style for this game. So this is how the two teams were set up on the ground whenever Chelsea tried to build their play from the back. Lewandowski was pressing the goalkeeper and Christensen, two wide wingers on the two Chelsea centre-backs, Bayern's two full-backs on Chelsea's two wing-backs, Thomas Müller and Thiago on Kovacic and Jorginho, and that left Kimmich in a 1v2 position against Mason Mount and Ross Barkley. So Chelsea often tried to use Giroud as the target man, who would often win the first ball and would try to lay it off in the space behind the Bayern fullbacks who were moving up to press the Chelsea wingbacks. Mason Mount and Ross Barkley, who were playing just behind Giroud, were making runs in those wide spaces to catch Bayern. Both Bayern fullbacks move up to press the Chelsea wingbacks as Chelsea try to build their play from the back. Willy Caballero goes long, Giroud wins the first ball and lays it off in the path of Mason Mount to exploit the space behind Alphonso Davies. Both the fullbacks are caught out of their position, Giroud wins the aerial duel and Mason Mount makes the run in the space. Giroud once again wins the first ball and heads it back for the one of Mason Mount. Giroud did a very good job of winning these aerial duels and heading the ball in the path of Mason Mount, but credit to Alphonso Davies, whose electric pace was always enough to help him to make the recovery runs and stop any offensive threat. Bayern Munich on the other hand was shifting to a back three during the build-up phase. Kimmich was often dropping in the defense, and that was allowing the fullbacks to move up and match Chelsea's defensive numbers. Chelsea tried to create a strong central overload whenever Bayern had the ball, as Chelsea tried to cut the central passing lanes. But that overload did not help Chelsea too much. The Bayern fullbacks who were allowed to move up with possession were constantly forcing the Chelsea wingbacks out of their positions to open the space in between the centre-back and the wing-back for the ones of Coman and Gnabry. And Bayern often tried to play long passes from the back to their front players to avoid the central overload of Chelsea. Kimmich dropping in the defense during the build-up phase, allowing the fullbacks to move up. Once again, back three and fullbacks moving up to make a front line of 5 men. Kimmich's deeper position gives the Bayern fullback the chance to push up and make a front line of 5 men against Chelsea's back 5. Since Ross Barkley and Mason Mount were busy creating the central overload to cut the central passing lanes, so Bayern's fullbacks had no issues whatsoever to move up and down the flanks. Mason Mount and Ross Barkley were trying to cut the central passing lanes as Chelsea tried to create a strong central overload, but that left Bayern's fullbacks totally free to receive the ball and pull the Chelsea wingbacks out of their positions to open the gaps for Gnabry and Coman. But the main issue for Chelsea in this game was the pace of Bayern Munich. Chelsea found it extremely difficult to deal with the speed of Bayern's fullbacks and their wingers. Rudiger was keeping a very tight marking on Coman, and this is where Coman started using his pace to free himself from Rudiger's tight marking. Coman drops deep, and Rudiger leaves his line to stay tight on Coman. Coman once again drops deep, and Rudiger once again leaves his line to keep a tight marking on Coman. Coman to Müller, and Thomas Müller's one-touch pass to Coman. And now Rudiger is left in no man's land, and he doesn't have the pace to keep up with Coman. Same starting position, but Coman's pace was too much for Rudiger, and Coman gets a free shot at the goal. And Chelsea had no answer to the pace of Bayern's offense. This time Coutinho drops deep, and he pulls Azpilicueta out of his position to open the space in the defense. Alphonso Davies to Coutinho, and Coutinho's one-touch pass back to Davies. And this time Reece James had no answer to the pace of Davies. Davies easily baits two Chelsea players by using his pace, and delivers a wonderful cross inside the box for Lewandowski to score the goal. Another Bayern player who created lots of problems for Chelsea was Thomas Müller. Thomas Müller was constantly finding spaces in between the lines, and he was the one who was mostly dictating the offensive play for Bayern. Whenever Jorginho and Kovacic moved up to participate in Chelsea's high press, it left Thomas Müller totally free in between the lines, and that often forced one of the Chelsea centre-backs to leave his line to cover Müller in between the lines. Jorginho moves up to initiate the high press, Lewandowski drops deep, and he pulls Kovacic wide, and that leaves Thomas Müller totally free to receive the ball in between the lines. Azpilicueta can also not step out, because if Azpilicueta steps out, then that would leave Gnabry totally free in the space. Thomas Müller receives the ball in between the lines, and that has now forced Christensen to step out of his line and cover Müller. Müller's one-touch pass in the space for Coman, which luckily for Chelsea, was intercepted by Christensen. Coman makes a run in the space that was left open by Christensen, but Thomas Müller's pass took a deflection and Chelsea avoided a dangerous situation. Thomas Müller once again receives the ball in between the lines, and he pulls Christensen out of his defensive line and opens the space for Lewandowski's run. Christensen steps out, and Müller plays a through ball to Lewandowski through that same central space that was left open by Christensen, and Lewandowski should have scored the goal. Bayern decided to keep their front three high up the ground all the time, even without possession. Whenever Bayern won possession, they often tried to play long passes from the back to one of their front three. Gnabry would often drop deep to pull Azpilicueta out of his defensive line, and he would play a pass to Lewandowski in the space. Lewandowski often made runs in the wide area, and that forced Christensen to move wide and cover Lewandowski, which left the spaces open in the central zone. Gnabry clearly had the speed benefit against Azpilicueta, who often found it really hard to stay with Gnabry. As soon as Lewandowski opened the central space, Gnabry would make central runs, and that left Rudiger in a 1v2 position with runners on both sides. Gnabry drops deep, and he pulls Azpilicueta out of his defensive line. Manuel Neuer immediately plays a long pass for Lewandowski in the wide area behind Azpilicueta. Lewandowski wins the first ball, heads it in the path of Gnabry, and now Christensen is left in a 1v2 position, and this is where Antonio Rudiger makes a mistake. Christensen is clearly outnumbered, and he also needs to keep an eye on the run of Lewandowski. So it's Rudiger's job to cover the central zone and leave the wide area for Alonso. Because as a defender, your first job is to always cover the central spaces. But instead of closing that central space, Rudiger kept falling back in a straight line, leaving the space wide open for Gnabry to make a run right through the heart of Chelsea's defense. I have no clue what was Rudiger thinking here, and why he did not bother to close this space. Gnabry makes an easy run and scores the goal. Bayern completely dominated this game, and Chelsea were actually lucky that the game ended at 3-0. Difference in the quality of the two squads definitely played a big part, but Bayern were also on point tactically. With a lead of 3 goals, it's safe to say that this tie is pretty much over now. Thank you so much guys for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.